Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February 11th, 2025 regular meeting of the Board of Education. Tonight we have with us Mr. Krasnoff, Mr. Lee, Mrs. Jacobson, myself, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Testani, Mr. Jersey, and Mrs. Maxon Kennelly. Also, we have representatives from Ward and from Walter Fitzgerald. And everyone would rise and pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With that, we can go into student reports, and why don't you start us off today on the Walter Fitz side?
Happening at WFC. WFC student interviewed First Selectman Bill Gerber about the town land and building attached to the WFC property. Students had previously interviewed Director of Facilities for Fairfield Public Schools, Angeles Poppin, and given presentation and maps on land and building history. Students in civics class created a community survey about the site to be circulated in the Selectmen's weekly newsletter.
Happy Year of the Snake. Students and staff celebrated Lunar New Year with Mandarin teacher Rose Healy by practicing Mandarin calligraphy, participating in a dragon and snake parade, and learning facts about the Chinese zodiac. Our resident student photographer has been instrumental in helping to create the first ever WFC yearbook. Representatives from Middle River Wetland Committee, Aztec Land Trust, and Bridgeport Public Schools came to Walter Fitz to begin working on our Long Island Sound Research Grant. Students are building partnerships with community stakeholders to create Fairfield Bridgeport Watershed Coalition to unite organizations in our local Long Island Sound watershed. This morning, WFC held the second quarter award ceremony for students who made achievements in attendance, citizenship, academic achievement, and other areas of life. Congratulations to all recipients.
Thank you. Ward.
Evening. It is great to see you all after the shortened week last week, thanks to the 2-hour delay on Monday and the snow day on Thursday. So thank you all. To begin, the PTA held its monthly virtual meeting last Wednesday where they covered the course selection process, which began about 2 weeks ago. They hosted a question and answer session with our Director of Students, Mr. Dane Brown.
Our course selection schedule got shifted due to the snow day last Thursday. During the week, our students have been conversing with teachers about what classes they should take and what is ranked for them. And on Thursday, students will enter their courses into Infinite Campus during a 15-minute homework.
And then last week, Wednesday, we had our monthly activity period where all of our clubs got a chance to meet in order to discuss their array of topics. In addition to that, they met to take their photos for the yearbook being distributed at the end of the year.
And Ward DECA hosted their Flower Grant fundraiser from February 3rd through the 5th, and they were sold during all lunch waves and will be delivered during homeroom on February 13th. This fundraiser was a nice way for students to spread their appreciation towards one another. And also, DECA will be having their garden catering fundraiser tomorrow from 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. And they encourage all to come, and if you're ordering online, to use code DECA25.
Next up, on January 31st, I had the pleasure of attending the Ward v. Ludlow basketball games on that Friday night. Congratulations to both our girls and boys for being victorious against Ludlow yet again. I'm sure they're still somewhere processing that. I'm sure that's why. But next up, tonight we will be honoring our senior boys at the senior night game against Stanford High, which began at 6:30. So good luck to them and go Ward.
Thank you very much. And you're welcome to stay, but we're gonna get right into the rest of the meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, you have questions?
Not a question. I just have to say, it is so cool to be in a town where when you drive past one of the high schools and you see I don't know that there was an empty spot in that parking lot. And that's just really cool. And I promise you that it is not a universal across all high schools. And it's just a real cool element to the high school experience in Fairfield.
I will say both student sections were cheerful, supportive, and respectful of each other as well. So you don't always see that
a high school gym either, but
Very true.
it was a great night. Great.
Any other comments or questions? All right, well, thank you very much for your updates. All right, we'll go out to the public comment on any items on our agenda tonight.
Hello, Nick McGarry, Fairfield Education Association. I want to speak about the controversial topics, policy of the town, the agenda this evening. And they're really just two things, speaking to our membership about this and reaching out for, feedback. There really were, two areas of concern. The one is that, item 3, seems to protect teachers because it says that teachers will teach what's on the curriculum. However, we do move in a very fast-paced moving world. Curriculum is updated every 10 years. So there are concerns, for instance, there is, I think it's item 4, ensures that both sides will be presented. So we know we're not going to embrace people who are denying things that are facts because it's in the curriculum. However, things are happening in real time that are not settled. There's no historical record. It's not dealt with in the curriculum. And especially in, say, social studies classes where event issues and things that are happening with civics, with, checks and balances are happening in real time. And we're just not sure, frankly, we're not sure. I can't speak against or for, but I can say we're concerned that this doesn't necessarily cover teachers and protect them. But it does raise, here are these things that could, that teachers run afoul of inadvertently. So we're a little concerned about that. And the second concern that was mentioned, just to speak it out, into the universe, like indoctrination stuff, we're just not doing that. It's not happening. If we were indoctrinating people, there'd be a lot more homework done, a lot more deodorant being used in the middle schools. And that would be our focus, not anything else along those lines. So I just wanted to share with you those concerns that, it feels like there might be a public perception that this is to fix things that are happening that, no evidence that we're not doing that. We're not indoctrinating anyone. So that was all.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? All right, seeing none, we can go on to our presentations. The first one we have tonight is the Fairfield Cares Survey. First read of that. I apologize, I did not notice on the
An item, I had a comment, I apologize, I didn't stand up.
want to offer public comment?
Yes. On the agenda is a topic around security. And I'd love to just broach and Michael to me.
I'm which security, what?
There was an item there around security, school security. It was, I believe, I apologize, I don't have the.
Oh, all right, so, that's true.
So I have made an exchange, I'm
Oh, sorry, name and address for the record.
sorry, my name is Alice Semino. I am a concerned parent of a student at Burr Elementary. But I speak on behalf of a number of students and parents in the community. There was a recent exchange between Michael and myself on January 23rd related to school shootings and the increase of them in our school databases. So since 2020, there's been a 3x increase in school shootings around the country. On the day of that exchange, which didn't really drive at resolution on what we're doing to increase security measures at all of our schools, not just at Burr Elementary. There was another school shooting at Antioch High School in Nashville, Tennessee. And so given the increase of shootings and gun violence in our country, including the recent changes in public policy, I wanted to kind of bring up a subject on what we're doing to ensure that we have the appropriate security measures at our schools. The reason specifically I'm here is because at Burr Elementary, but at most schools here, it looks like on the elementary side, there isn't a full-time staff security personnel at the school. So while there are security like buttons that you can use to enter a premise in morning drop-offs or pickups, any parent or otherwise can walk into the school, and we hope that they have the best intentions for our students and our staff. but that may not be the case. And so the question is, without a full-time security personnel to even respond to a situation should it ever arise, I'm trying to understand what protocols otherwise we have in place to ensure the safety of our student body and our educators, because I suspect of every topic that's on the agenda here today, security is job number one for all of us. And so that's kind of topic one. Well, that's the topic that I'd love to kind of discuss today. And also ask if there are any budgets set aside for increased security measures at schools, and if there aren't, what I could do as a parent, a member of the PTA, to ensure that we raise the appropriate funds to get the right personnel in place at our facilities.
I appreciate your comment. This is not a question and answer period. This is for items on the agenda only. We're happy to hear your concerns about security, but this is not the forum for that. I will say that in 2 weeks, we will be having in this room a town hall meeting, which will be more appropriate for a back and forth discussion.
What's the date of that?
The 25th, 2 weeks from today.
And is there something that you need to bring to that meeting?
Just yourself,
Just myself.
willingness to talk.
All right, thank you so much.
Any other members of the public wish to comment on items on the agenda? Moving back on, I wanted to apologize about the Fairfield Care Survey. It says Mrs. Flynn on it, but we have Board Chair Emerita Christine Vitale here to present for us.
I'm Christine Vitale. I currently serve on the Board of Selectmen. I am proud to be the co-chair of the Fairfield Cares Community Coalition and a former member of this board. I'm joined tonight by
Scott Charzumpak. I am the town librarian, but also on the Fairfield Cares Board and the chair of the data committee.
So just a quick recap, Fairfield Cares is a coalition. Our membership is open to everybody and we encourage all of you who can, but for our regular meetings, we have representatives from the library, the health department, the police department, Health and Human Services, the First Selectman's Office, the Board of Education has a liaison, as well as a number of community service providers, the health department that usually attend our meetings every month. The mission of the Fairfield Cares is to promote overall wellness within the community, but mostly promoting healthy choices in our youth. We are funded through a grant from the federal government as well as a local state grant, the LPC grant. And as you know from past presentations, on reducing substance use, vaping, marijuana, and alcohol in our youth. As part of our work, it's very important to get a read on where our students are in these areas. So through our grant, we are required every 2 years to survey our students and thank the school district's partnership on this. We're here tonight to bring the survey to you for review this week and hopefully approval at the next meeting. The survey is given every 2 years. It's given to 7th through 12th graders. The coordinating parent survey that's given around the time period. The survey that is in front of you tonight is unchanged from the survey 2 years ago. So you were all data geeks, so you very much appreciate the importance of capturing longitudinal data, which is why you really don't encourage changing the survey year after year. Survey results are used by our coalition informing programming, used by the school district and our PTAs, and we appreciate your support. Last 10 years, the survey's been given in our schools at least, and look forward to just answering any questions tonight. Scott is the chair. Feel free to add anything that I forgot in the initial introduction.
I just want to echo the fact that we are a coalition and there are multiple groups that come to our table. And this survey is actually beneficial. I could say it's beneficial for the library when we're planning programming around this age group. So it's really for the entire community. It's really a great tool. We are appreciative of the school district for letting us do this.
We also work with an evaluator just for past surveys and the survey that's in front of you today, just in terms of for survey development, using best practices, having a platform to used to collect the data that is secure for our students. Students have the option to opt out of questions. Parents will be notified that the survey is given prior to administration in the schools. And as you remember, once we get the survey results, the coalition will come back and present the data to the board. Hopefully it'll inform some of your decision-making as you're making decisions about programming and future curriculum, especially the health curriculum. I know that we've had teachers and staff from the high schools come and just give feedback to us and take that data back to their buildings for school programming.
Great, thanks so much. Any questions from the board members?
Oh, I look forward to grilling you. No, first of all, few things with the, thank you for bringing this before us. I appreciate what's in. I'm curious, is there anything that is different from the iteration we last approved? I know social media is something that several years ago was no longer on there, and now I'm very grateful is represented here.
That was on the last version of the survey. I believe the question that was added is the question about stressors. So 7 is the ad. Ms. Jacobson is also a past current member of the data committee as well. As Ms. So very much appreciate that mental health, stress very often leads to substance use. So wanted to have where our kids are on this, where their parents might think they are on this, and how that may or may not play into whether or not they're turning to substances at a greater frequency or than other students.
And my next question, I actually don't know the answer to this because I don't know if it would be within the purview of your grant to do so. But if you saw information resulting from the survey that prompted you to want to bring to the attention of the board of the district an advocacy for changes that went beyond the health curriculum. If you saw something that was of concern, for example, some of the questions have as an answer in school. And if you saw something in there, would you, obviously we wouldn't want to wait to get that kind, it would be up to everyone here to, or the staff in terms of what direction they wanted to take. But are you allowed to advocate for, we've noticed something and we want you to know,
Well,
bring this to your attention?
I think that would be part of when we come back to present the survey results, part of that conversation. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we do have a representative of the board serving as a liaison. So if things are coming up just through coalition meetings, I would hope that part of the reason to have that liaison is to bring information back to the board. Well, I've been involved in the coalition, 10 years ago as a PTA president for the middle school. At that time reached out to me as a PTA president just because we were seeing substance use starting earlier and earlier and wanted to get that read, really getting the prevention at the earlier ages. And our high school people, what is their official title? No, like they're not guidance counselors, but that
Personnel.
they are
Pupil personnel.
pupil personnel.
Not purple.
They are active in the coalition as well, and we use them as a resource of just what they're hearing in the schools. I think Scott, you just in terms of the data committee, if there's something I'm missing.
Sure, and the question is there something from our funding sources that would restrict us from reaching out?
Right.
Absolutely no.
Okay.
So, and again, this is a partnership with the school district, so if we were to see something early, we would most definitely put it to.
And I actually forgot the degree to which school personnel were involved with Fairfield Care. So that reminder about pupil personnel service, that would be right there. So that's a good reminder. So thank you for that.
And they can't come to every meeting just because of scheduling, but our meetings are at 8:30 to try to get fast drop off for the high school level and have it be at the start of the day. So staff that want to attend, they can, and it won't, fall right in the middle of the day. And we value their input so much. We're also, right now, we're in the midst of looking for a program coordinator, full-time staff. at a holding pattern on some of the initiatives that we wanted to move forward this year. We are still active in the community through a variety of tabling events throughout the year, which is a great opportunity to talk to kids, and parents. Parents come up, but a lot of youth was really happy to see just come and have the conversation and pick up some of our swag, and there's a little bit left at the back table. We've been partnering with the PTAs, not necessarily on prevention, about some of the work on social media, work with the health department, the police department on drug take back days, doing Narcan training, QPR training, really just being as a resource, as a place that if the community has concerns about overall wellness issues, obviously, they come to school staff first, but it's just another avenue to look for help, get involved, and advocate. And welcome, the board's feedback and the school district's feedback, because you guys really are on the and with the library, we've had conversations just about the amount of kids that come down and use the libraries, especially at the middle school level, that they're on the front lines as well in terms of what we're seeing in our youth. So it's definitely a community coalition. It takes a village, and happy to be part of that village and for the continued partnership with the school district, both in supporting the surveys and just serving as secretary right now for the.
Then my last question is about if we did have suggestions, some might be of a grammar nature, that I could just give those to you. But there were a couple of things related to content that I was wondering if we had suggestions, is that something that could even be incorporated by our vote in a month? Let me give you a couple of examples. On social media, which is, I'm keenly interested in the topic. Something that you don't have in here, it's sort of, there's a little bit, I guess, in the substance abuse part, but in that standalone social media, the few questions you have there, the notion of what behavior has social media driven on your part? Has social media influenced blank in you? Has social media prompted you to, and it's a little bit in the earlier questions, but I was curious about that. I don't even need a reaction. I just wanted to show a couple of things I was thinking. Another one was where there was something with social media about the use of inappropriate pictures. And it made me curious because I know it's supposed to be part of some education, but ascertaining if they know what it is. What is it? I mean, they may think some things are really obvious, but the extent to which an inappropriate picture can also be illegal. They might not be appropriate. It might not be something that Fairfield Cares is interested in. All I'm asking is if I put this together, is it something you could even consider, or is it really just this draft?
You're not the only community that does a survey like this. Also, data that we can compare with other communities. So these questions were generated from our data person. And she's very in touch with other data people or other coalitions around the state. So I think we can bring it to her, but she might have some good reasons why she's asking the questions.
I completely agree. I just simply wanted to know, am I wasting my time if I made some suggestions and sent them on to you?
Really share that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And I think that, as I said in the beginning, hesitant to change survey year to year because it's just hard to compare data, and we're comparing to other communities, but we can definitely bring it back to our evaluator. And I would just ask not to put too much work on you. I think it's just valuable feedback just to bring back to the coalition, aside from the survey question. You bring up a really good point, and going back to when I was a PTA president and used the survey data, that was the type of programming that PTAs use for students, that taking it to another level, that level of education from our police department.
And I respect the notion of wanting it to be mostly the same year to year, but obviously concerns slightly change. And I know the questions, again, most of this does need to be the same, but there are also, I have to believe, new areas of focus that you're a great resource for the district.
Yeah, definitely, share it. We'll bring it back to the evaluator. She is a professor. She couldn't be here tonight, but she teaches on Tuesday nights. And I apologize that we weren't here at the last meeting. She was away. We didn't realize that she was out of the country, so we didn't have a final draft for you. So we will definitely bring it back to her, get her feedback and can share that.
Should we give it to you if we have it?
You can give it to the chair and Mr. Peterson can forward it along and you can try to get an answer, sooner rather than later, just initial feedback, but
Thank you.
Mrs. Guernsey.
Oh, thank you so much for this presentation and for the work that you do. I just wanted to respond to Mrs. Maxicanelli's point. On page 5, the new question number 7 specifies, it actually specifies social media and as a line item under how much stress, anxiety, or worry do the following give you to your daily life, so that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The survey absolutely begins to capture the impact of social media on the individual. What I was kind of curious about is of the level of self-awareness of, and where does it drive your action is something that I didn't really see in here to that degree.
Thank you.
Ms. Jacobson.
Hi, thank you for being good work. I have an operational question actually, and maybe through the chair yourself. And so usually this was administered in February, I believe, just before we get into the spring. Stress test phase. I don't know if you know plans that high schools and those did this in for, and just to Mr. Peterson, will this be a voting item on the 25th before the town hall to kind of move it along? Or I'm just worried, I'm always wondering if, is this a voting item tonight or is the 25th okay from an implementation standpoint, just what you were thinking about?
To go that, I was gonna have a couple of voting items, this and the non-recurrent capital, before we get into the public's comment of 25th. So we should be able to get this on the next agenda.
And just speaking to Mrs. Maxicanelli's, there have been times in the past where we've done some supplemental questions that weren't necessarily common, just because in certain communities, they might have certain things happening. And in the older days, it was almost like a supplemental issue. So using the new format and the new platform that we have, if the coalition thinks that whatever Mrs. Maxicanelli might submit, I don't think it would be too difficult to add as an add-on, so to speak. We wouldn't have to to Scott's point, longitudinal comparison to other communities, but if there's value add to the school district or to the community, we could certainly look at that. And I thank you for being here and for all your work on this. I hope that when it comes back to the board, we support this in terms of really being able to give our students a voice. It's one of the places where they actually get to have a voice, but yet it's completely anonymous. So thank you for being here and for all of the materials. And one big thing I wanted to note that you didn't state is that we do have a new website. Fairfield Cares has a new website, still on the town website. So all the materials that you have today, they're available for parents. We have a lot of guides on vaping and social hosting and social media and cell phone use and mental health topics. So all of those are available online now too as well. So a lot of good work happening and for all you do.
we have more, if you like. A little activity ad for you, if there's any literature that you want or just your own networks, we have a lot of happy to just share that with you as well.
Mr. Krasnoff.
I'll reiterate, thank you for all you do. I think we all feel that way. Number 46, not to get into like the minutia, and you might not even be able to answer it. I'm just a little surprised at the question. The parents discourage use of video games and gambling. Is there, any reason why that was tied in, just knowing all the other. The next one's like, I'm just wondering why the gambling.
It's getting to be more and just online.
Like, I feel maybe it's separate things. Video games and gambling. A lot of parents allow video games, but they may not allow gambling. Vice versa. Again, not to get into the minutia. It's just they get a lot of answers that you wouldn't expect because they don't allow one or the other. Just poof.
Any other questions or comments?
Follow up with the evaluator on that too.
just
Mr. Lee.
piggyback on that, when you talk about gambling, I'm interested, I like to see how it splits down with online or actually like gambling among friends, and if they're online, are they going to the casino site or one of the DraftKings kind of thing, and I think questions, things like, do they participate in fantasy sports online ties into that also.
I think actually that's a great point. I'll follow up on that.
Ms. Jacobson.
I'll follow up on that point. We have seen kind of the intersection between gaming and gambling, almost calling it gambling. At this point, because a lot of components inside some of the online and e-gambling are very similar to gambling, where you're earning something of value, loot boxes, skins, things like that. In the 2023 survey, we did see with the legalization here of esports and gambling, an increase in our youth reporting that, and that is somewhat of a concern. I do agree with your point, though, understanding if it's like bingo and lottery tickets, or is it the might be beneficial information to understand what would we call an access question. So that could be interesting information as well.
Any other questions? All right, well, on behalf of the board, thank you for presenting, and I'm sure we'll be in contact before the 25th, but I will have this on the 25th agenda. We'll give the board members who are not here tonight a chance to weigh in if they want.
Feedback and any questions? The chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving along, we'll go through the presentation of first reading of capital non-recurring project, Roger Level Middle School fire alarm upgrade, Thomas Local Security upgrade, and Fairfield Level High School elevator number 2 modernization. Just to contextualize this, obviously these were things that we voted in our budget, part of the budget that we adopted in our last meeting. However, at the time, we considered taking them off and putting them onto town bonding. We were, as a body, a little apprehensive about doing that without more assurances from the town. And so the thought was to put them in a normal non-recurring capital format so that when we move further down the budget pathway, we will have this ready to go as if we had been doing this all along. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Papa George.
Self-explanatory, as you know, there was a small narrative that's already. Roger Level Middle School is the fire alarm project. A outdated system, and it's a proprietary system that's not supported by any manufacturer any longer. Parts or even software for it, so that's why that prioritized safety and security project. Go into safety, security in public forum. So there's questions about that one, I'd be happy to answer it. And then Fairfield Ludlow High School is the elevator, the main elevator in the building. There's 2 elevators that go from the main level or lower level to the 3rd floor, and then there's one elevator that goes the 3rd floor down to the lower level of the area. So this one is the main one off the main hallway, and what makes this one a vital elevator is in order to get from front area, the back area cafeteria to this not this to the other elevator, is to go outside under the walkway and back into the hallway, whereas this one is accessible from inside all the way around.
I can lead off with a question. One of the things that I noticed, we obviously discussed removing this from our budget in our budget vote. One of the numbers is different here. So the Tomlinson Middle School number that we were considering in our amendment was an adjustment of $126,481. But here it's $206,481. Is there a reason for the discrepancy?
Yes, so we changed the scope of work slightly, increased it due to a request from the town. They wanted to see if it was going to be a bonding request that it's higher, so we were the phasing into the side.
So it's additional work we would have wanted to do.
We would be doing further out, so we're just moving forward to get it done sooner.
Mr. Lee.
Are you confident on the fire alarm system on the 5% contingency? Because do we know for sure the supporting wires will handle the new system coming in and?
Thought was, we've walked it with several contractors. They believe because of the age of the building, they're not concerned about the wiring itself. It's just the devices themselves that would have to be changed out. So we did carry the contingency in case there is something that's identified once they start pulling.
And you feel that that contingency in 21,000 will be enough to cover any overrides?
Jacobson.
Just through you, Mr. Peterson, do you know if, by taking it out, should we take it out of the budget and later on, are these items that would therefore need to go out to bid versus being in our operating?
So the Ledlow elevator would most likely have to go out to bid. The Tomlinson Middle School project, we have been working with a consultant who was on state contract, so that's why we not bid for that. And the Roger Ledlow Middle School fire alarm, we would be open to both. We would look at bidding and we would also look at who's on state contract, but the best option would be to move forward with them.
I was just wondering if that changes the timeline at all for any of these.
Should not, I would hope, but you can guarantee it until they're all approved.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Trying to give some extra time because I do hope to put this on the agenda for the 25th before we get into our full session, as we talked about with the Fairfield Cares. Just knock out this one and just have it ready ahead of our presentation for the Board of Selectmen, which is on the 26th, or Board of Selectmen on the 26th. So if you have this in hand, I'd like to do that. So hopefully we can knock out those 1-2 items of business before we get into the town hall session, 25th. I guess so. If you have any further questions about this, try to get them in before the meeting, so we can get right to the public. All right, thanks. So we'll move on to the consent calendar, the approval of minutes. One thing, is it both, Max and Kelly, you reached out with some concerns? It was with both the special and the regular.
For the 14th and the 21st, the blue heading referenced regular meeting, the text referenced special meeting.
So I'm happy to remove this from consideration for right now, just so we can go give them another look and come back next meeting and maybe do that as a quick vote, just to make sure that everything, all the i's are dotted and the t's are crossed. If there's no objection.
Isn't it just as simple as amending the?
There were other things.
There were a few things and
Nothing
these were
significant.
complicated meetings, but I just want to make sure that what we put out to the public, and the draft minutes are still up on the website, I believe, right? So like if the public wants to see the big picture, they can do it that way, and we can get these cleared up and corrected as soon as possible. And with that, I'll move on to the old business, 7A, approval of policy 6144, controversial issues. With the recommended motion, the Board of Education approve policy 6144, controversial issues. Mrs. Maxon Kelly is seconded by Julie.
Yeah, so, I'm happy to say that Mr. McGarry, as well as a few other FEA members, were at our policy meetings on this, and we hashed over a lot of the language choices that were made. And I do appreciate Mr. Krasnov did reach out to me with some concerns regarding the definition, and I'll let him speak to that himself since he is here. But otherwise, I did not get any other commentary. I had offered to the board that if they had things, if possible, and again, obviously nothing binding, that they could have gotten to our attention before last week's policy meeting. Policy would have had a chance to try to hash through them in advance of our vote this evening if we have a vote. But I did not receive any other feedback. So at this point, I'm just open to questions.
So my comment was that I felt it was a little too large of a policy. There really wasn't any definition of what makes up a controversial issue. Could think of a lot of ways, maybe not us sitting at the table, but down the road it could be used in ways it wasn't intended. And I just have concerns. I did read some other towns, they define it a little bit. You know, for example, a few towns had religion in, that was one controversial. Religion was a controversial topic that they actually mentioned. And then on the flip side, there were some towns that actually encouraged conversation with controversial issues and had a policy on that. So I understand the purpose. And if this is what everyone wants to do, I get it, but I personally feel it should be defined better. Yeah, I could say the Yankees are controversial because I'm a Yankee fan and you're talking about the Red Sox. I'm not dumbing it down a little bit, but I'm just saying it's very open-ended.
You have an amendment to offer at this point?
I don't have an amendment. I didn't really have language, but at this point, I would not vote and support it, and that was more what my was about. I would love to see it go back to the committee and maybe thought through a little bit more with either a definition or a little more explanation of what the thought process was.
Mrs. Guernsey.
I just wanted to add for people that weren't a part of this policy meeting, Dr. Zamjancic has told us repeatedly that we don't need this policy. I mean, I've already communicated to this board that it's not a popular one for me. But I mean, it is an option, like we're not obligated. Writing this policy was really difficult. I think the longer it got, the more problematic it became. And I'm not comfortable with it, especially after hearing from Mr. McGarry, because I was concerned about holding it back if in fact it would help teachers, but hearing that it might actually hurt them. Yeah, it doesn't really work for me, even though I appreciate that we tried to tackle it. I think it's not quite there. I'd be happy to take another stab at it in policy, but that's not up to me.
Ms. Mexican.
So responding to a few things. First, just to be clear, this was not a policy ad. If you look down, this is one of our, famous 2004 policies. So we already had this. Everything that is in black is existing language. So, and in keeping that language, there is absolutely encouragement of tackling controversial issues. Also, although there's a definition at the bottom, there actually had been, Ms. Guernsey can correct me if I'm wrong, the definition had appeared sort of in 3 different places, one of which we deleted. But if you'll notice up in the opening paragraph, there is also explicit mention of religion, in addition to political philosophy, culture, and other influences. So by its very nature, what's controversial one day won't be the next, and whatever is not controversial can suddenly become so. And thus the very deliberately vague nature of this. And so I certainly, I'm always, it's not up to me. If it gets sent back to policy, it gets sent back to policy. But I would feel that we need much more feedback on what we are doing. Because, well, in my policy report later, you'll know that, we're tackling some pretty important work right now. I'd like to get this addressed because there are only more controversial issues coming up. And I definitely hear that it's not quite clear on how helpful this will be or not, but no one is advocating for or has advocated yet that we just outright delete it. And therefore, if you're going to have a topic, I think while I don't find this prescriptive, I found the additional information to be very helpful. I think it's also helpful for our administrators in terms of the guidance they need to give their staff. And so I thought this had a lot of very helpful reminders about what should and should not happen. And it's a useful resource for a teacher. That would be, and I say that as a teacher, that I would have found something like this, should I, be contemplating broaching something controversial, I would have found this helpful in terms of my responsibility, because while it's very convenient, not convenience is the wrong word, while it is something you'd like to be able to say that we can rely on the common sense of our teachers. And I think by and large, you absolutely can. What might seem common sense to one teacher might not to a public. And I think any teacher having this as guidance, any administrator having this as a helpful policy to guide their staff as a sort, I think this could be a very valuable source of professional development. And yes, it absolutely can raise questions that weren't previously there. That's the nature of controversial issues. We don't want this to be, it needs to be flexible, I guess is what I'd say. So I can't imagine how we could make it more specific in the manner that you say. through the chair, Mr. Krasnov. And not that I'm not open to it, I just don't see how we could make it better than this or where this is flawed. And I think taking the other view of maybe we should just remove it. If everyone, could take a look at that language in black, which basically says, we encourage the tackling of controversial issue. Students need to develop these analytical skills. They will have the opportunity, where appropriate, to present and support their conclusions. If it's the wish of the board that serves us well enough as is, then really the vote should be to simply vote it down, and then we continue with what we have as is. So again, or then there's a whole different step of if somebody wants to advocate for an outright deletion. But we do already have this in policy.
Mr. Lee, you want to follow this?
Well, I was just gonna follow up. I have no issue with the current policy, and I again have no issue with adding to it if we're adding to it to define it better. But I'm not necessarily sure, and I appreciate all the work. I'm not sure all the additions at this point, from my point of view, enhanced it and kept it. None of it added a definition in any way, shape, form, as far as I was concerned. I just didn't feel it was necessary at this point. That's just my opinion. To me, if anything, it became more controversial, the actual policy.
Mr. Lee.
So I guess so we go back to Mr. McGarry, we vote this down, it goes back to the old policy. So the current teachers don't have an issue with the current policy that's in play or this,
That was not a topic of the policy meeting. The point is, this is a current policy as is right now. So, I would want, this might be giving you more of an answer and you weren't done yet, Mr. Lee. But so then that as a topic did not come up at all. Was this satisfactory for you before? Did a staff member feel that they had received the guidance that was sufficient in terms of moving forward with their instruction? So that wasn't broached.
so I guess then my next question, we turn it down, does the policy committee go back and now address some of these issues, or are we okay just leaving it as is with the current policy?
That would be at the directive of the board. If this group votes it down, as far as I'm concerned, it's done. We're not taking it up again because we have received no direction on how to make it better. I also, after Mr. Krasnov reached out to me, I also looked at the the policies of surrounding districts. I didn't find a definition that I liked better than this. I thought that we spend probably the most amount of time on that per se. And I found this useful and in terms of the best way you can be general and yet specific. So I don't think there's a better definition out there. So to me, the real issue comes if you're looking at the policy page on page B, those guidelines. That's what makes this policy different. Otherwise, what comes before that are just, it's a slightly, the previous policy version in black has no definition whatsoever. It just has the word controversial with no understanding of, well, what makes this controversial or not. But of course, if you don't think the definition is helpful, then, then what we have put in is irrelevant. But the big difference here is what is included on the guidelines of things like, students shall be assured of their right to form and express an opinion without jeopardizing their grades. The idea of the balanced factual information, the instructions shall not reflect adversely upon persons because of, that these could be helpful reminders. Quite frankly, all of them. If I didn't like them, I wouldn't have voted for it. But I really do think the guidelines page is where especially this makes this different from other districts. And most importantly, different from what we previously had in the black language.
Ms. Jacobson.
Thank you. Just some specifics on the first page A, and through you to the chair, I'm not sure, to the chair or possibly to Dr. Zavajanzik, since it relates to the curriculum. The very last sentence, sensitive and controversial issue topics are components of the curriculum. I was just looking for understanding of any conversation that may have been at the committee level. What is the difference between sensitive and controversial here? I see.
I don't recall we tackled the word sensitive. We
Okay.
just kind of grouped them together, but I can't speak for Dr. Zavjancic having a sense of that. Yeah, might as well stay.
I was gonna sit down.
So
I
no,
agree that there's no difference when we wrote it. The definition came from Kate, which we lifted and put into this policy. So this was a 2004 policy, as Ms. Maxon-Kennelly said. It came up in the audit to, I guess, revise and approve. We went through the process of what the changes were from Kate from 2004 to now. And what you see in front of you are those changes with some variations that the committee discussed.
can I keep going? Thank you. I didn't see this actually on the audit list from July. Okay, the components of the curriculum, where it says issue topics are components of the curriculum. Can you just share some examples of what is in our current curriculum that would fall under this definition? In the definition of curriculum. Bottom of the page A.
So repeat where you are, sensitive and controversial issues.
The first sentence after the word curriculum.
So
Derived elements.
it says sensitive and controversial issue topics are components of the curriculum, such as.
Ms. Maxon-Kennelly's point, I can't say that here today because tomorrow that may shift.
Today, in the curriculum today.
I don't know.
So you don't have any examples from curriculum today?
I'll give you a list. Let me, I hate to give an example because it alerts it to certain things. Separation of powers is taught to our students, right?
Controversial?
Well, that may not be controversial. It was a topic of the Constitution that they talked about. Now, perhaps that's a controversial issue. I don't know. So it's really hard for me to articulate in this moment right now what is a controversial issue, which is why we did not list topics specifically to this policy, because tomorrow there may be a different controversial issue that the prescribed curriculum has that was not controversial 2 days ago.
Okay,
I'm not trying to be elusive when I say that.
I understand. I think that's part of the issue. So I'm gonna go to the next page, B. I actually also had 3 and 4 concerns on that. Can we, Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly, was this exactly from CABE, these guidelines? They are the author of all of these?
I'd have to go back. Sorry, I don't want to speak.
No, go right ahead.
I'd have to go back and go word for word because there were edits in the policy committee, but I lifted them directly from the CABE's model policy before it was presented there. I don't remember how much was shifted policy committee to give you an answer for right now.
And I apologize. My draft with the edits on it is at home. But I don't recall, these were certainly ones we talked about at length. I don't recall our tweaking the language here, though.
I looked at all districts in Fairfield County for this. Most of them don't actually have it. But no one has this. So no one has this policy.
Looked as well. And I believe the earliest one was
91?
There was a 91 without a doubt. There was some like 2016, 2017. So I don't know when CABE actually put this out. There are some very, very old ones and some newer-ish ones, but we have the newest that was within the CABE policy manual.
Yeah, I just think it's important to note that no one has actually adopted this. If this language is entirely from CABE, and I'm not saying it is, or maybe there's things that have been added here that weren't entirely from CABE. I do have concerns around 3 explicitly because the adopted curriculum piece, but on our existing language, it does speak to that idea of continuous examination as new things come to light. So there seems to be a conflict in terms of, well, if you can only do something that was adopted 10 years ago, but then on the first page, today is something new, it seems to put educators in somewhat of a box that would be an impossible decision.
There could be content and skills in a curriculum that were adopted 10 years ago that have a different meaning today in the way that they're taught.
Just saying how I interpret it in terms of being almost inconsistent with each other, that's all. And then the last thing, is there any, number 8, you guys on B, is there any subject matter that is prohibited by state or federal law that we know of?
Well, I think in the legislature right now, there is a bill to talk about global warming. For example, it is in the NGSS science standards, and I believe our state is looking to shift or strike some of that language. So there's stuff that they say we have to teach. It's generally within the standards. Prohibited, I wouldn't say so, but I don't know if anything's coming.
Okay, and then the last one is the guest speaker piece. This goes back to the definition on controversial issues, so we would only be having a guest speaker come who is aligned with the approved curriculum. But then our teachers are responsible for providing after, how does that work?
I have an example, so that may be your follow-up question, but if we were to bring in a guest speaker on a controversial issue that was only stating one side, because remember, I forget what number it is, it says it has to be balanced. If they were only stating one side, we would expect that the other side is articulated as well by our classroom teachers. Meaning that they were not presenting the balanced view of it as the guest speaker.
Okay, so that's like.
One example we talked about in committee was, and I'm gonna try to be as vague as Dr. Zavchancik was and hope that you can fill in the blanks. That in my school, a speaker came in for a whole class assembly, was from a specific country and spoke to the issues of that country. This was controversial because there was another group in that part of the world that did not support everything that that speaker would have said. And so that fell back on the teachers hard, who were not prepared to do anything of the sort. The speaker had been invited in. It was a fabulous presentation, but there absolutely was another side. And I don't think anyone regretted that the speaker came in, but the school was not prepared with the fallout, is what I would say. And that's not a reason to not have a speaker, but it is a reason to be prepared that people feel heard when it comes to controversial issues. I don't know if that's helpful.
It's helpful in the sense that then I get worried back to the curriculum piece. So a speaker comes in, it's not in the curriculum, but yeah, we have the policy that you can only teach from the curriculum, and then now they have to come up with a lesson plan to counter or to, do you know what I'm saying? So
the issue with the topic was in the curriculum, but this person came at it from a very specific point of view, and only that point of view. There was alluding to, we now have, topics here at home, where things are happening very quickly on the national scene that there are genuine constitutional questions about. Well, a teacher would need to know you're tackling, because it is part of the curriculum. What the Constitution says is part, but there are two genuine points of view of, yes, this is okay, no, it is not. A teacher can't just say, yes, this is okay, and leave it there. They would have an obligation because the curriculum says to address the Constitution. Now, that's not an issue that perhaps existed, do the math, 4 weeks ago, but which are now. And there is genuine debate over what is the correct answer. And in fact, well, I should take that back. There's genuine debate over what's okay. I don't want to say a correct answer because I'm not sure how much of that can be considered a fact. But so these are explicitly referenced in the curriculum. Anyone broaching these topics are not running afoul of curriculum. They're not outside of the curriculum, but it's happening in real time. And therefore, it's almost their obligation to broach it. Their students may have questions on it. A teacher needs to be reminded that there are responsibilities that they hold on behalf of the district in that instruction, and that's why this is in the instruction part.
Without viewpoint discrimination.
Correct.
okay, I just have one last question. I'm gonna go back to number 3 in here and on the second page, where it gets into where teachers may not advocate his or her personal opinion or viewpoint, and the superintendent may instruct teachers to refrain from sharing personal views in the classroom on controversial topics. Is that in the K policy?
That was shifted by the policy committee.
What does that mean, shifted?
That was not the original language. And I don't wanna speak for the committee.
No, please do, since I don't have my notes.
They wanted to make sure that the onus was placed on the administration, not the teachers, on making sure that they were aware of the policy.
Okay,
I
so,
don't remember the original language, I don't have it with me.
yeah, and I mean, I understand, these are complicated issues, the language is tough, it's, you know, making sure everything aligns and it's, right for all parties involved.
So you're having, just to bring, there's a current case here in Connecticut that's playing out in the courts, in the media. A teacher in, I'll leave the district out, is on administrative leave right now for having a cross on display in the classroom. Now, originally, it was just on display. From my understanding, as more has been released, some commentary from administration in the district, that there was questions as to whether the teacher was imposing her religious beliefs on her students. And specifically her Christian faith. So that's obviously an issue that we would want to prevent here in the district, that teacher would not push their particular religious beliefs on their students.
No, I understand that, I'm addressing per the definition on the front page of what we're actually talking about here. And going back to Mr. Krasnoff's point in reviewing, some language from other districts are far more generous, shall we say, or affirmative in terms of trying to protect teachers from attacks. I think that 1991 is, I don't know what was going on in 1991, but there was something going on in 1991 where there needed to be statements in policy around protecting teachers and administrators from pressure groups. So that exists in some language too. So thank you for answering my questions. I appreciate it. I just have some concerns about it at this time. Thank you.
I would just from my personal opinion, as an administrator, but also on the other end, as once executive board member of a collective bargaining unit, I don't think we want to be too specific. I think as you get more and more specific, there's less openness to interpret on behalf and advocacy for Mr. McGarry to advocate for his teachers as well. So as we get very, very pointed and focused in the language, it is very then much more difficult to get out of a situation if you're a teacher as well. The administration would have more grounds for corrective or disciplinary action. So I think you want to kind of balance it enough where at least there could be some objectivity and negotiation as to whether the teacher violated the policy or not. Just looking out from a teacher perspective, that we don't want to put guardrails too narrow, where then they are pigeonholed into having to be very always cognizant in the back of their mind if they're saying something. We want them to be able to do their jobs, but not go too far over the line where it gets them into trouble.
If it's helpful, then I'll be done, to the committee, if this does go back, 3 and 4 were really, my main areas of concern, so I'll leave it at that, thank you.
Krasnoff.
Just to follow up on all this, when I said define it more, it was just with the way the current policy was written, like the new with the edits. The old policy to me was a little bit more open to interpretation. I actually prefer it that way. The current events is actually what worries me the most. It's not the historical stuff. It's very easy to argue both sides of historical stuff. When it comes to current events, I think it gets a little trickier. And some of those following numbers that I think could be tough. Like, without getting the specific example you gave, I can think of a lot that happened in the last 3 weeks. That you can sit here and argue whether it's constitutional or not. I honestly don't even know the answer, and I know a lot about the Constitution. And unless we're all experts, it puts the teachers in a very awkward position.
Ms. Maxine Kelly.
It's an interesting point you raised, because I think sometimes it also might be valuable to remind teachers that they're not an expert in what they raise. And if they don't feel comfortable due to this very policy, it might be a good reason for them to be given pause. Who wants to be the subject of an article because of a parent protest, because something that could be a useful, offset of this, that if it is controversial, they do have an obligation. They have a professional obligation. And the district is right to have expectations of them accordingly. I absolutely, as Dr. Zapjanczyk captured, and as I stated up front, I absolutely think the primary onus of this is on administration to provide the professional development to make sure that staff is aware. As you say, the initial language in black has absolutely, am I correct? No definition at all. It simply uses a word with no definition. And I'm not sure that's a good idea either. And that's going to be, the vote of this board will determine if you believe that is needed. But
Mexicanelli, I'll just say, we did strike the original definition to the ends from very much the same, in the first black paragraph, 3 lines down, was the original definition
which one?
on the policy.
Yeah, that's where we went through several drafts. All right, so thank you for that correction. I look at to Mrs. Jacobson's point number 4. We thought that was, remember that that would be a line of the policy directed especially to teachers as a reminder that students can't be jeopardized grade-wise in terms of so long as their views are recorded, and so long as their views do not constitute harassment, which absolutely could be the case in the history of this past school year. I don't know. I don't mean to argue for it. I thought it was a good policy. I felt comfortable voting it out. I thought it provided helpful direction. I thought it provided vital direction to administration. And I felt that the previous draft was lacking as being, I don't think it did much. I don't think it provided anyone with any direction. And we live in a world where controversial issues are going to be up and running and getting ahead of us before we've even realized what someone may have said or done. It provided, again, my opinion, virtually no guidance to staff and less guidance to administrators because there was nothing in there that dictated a course of action. So I don't know how much more needs to be said. But there are 2 issues before us. One, just voting it down or voting it forward. And we always say in policy, if this gets approved and then issues emerge directly because of a policy we have put in place, we always want that feedback. I would never be shy about saying, we created a problem here, let's bring this up again. But again, the 2 issues of returning to black, or do we return it to policy and give us some marching orders of what you want us to consider?
All right, so I think we've probably heard.
Just have a quick question through the chair to Mr. Testani. Have we had issues that this policy needs to be defined better? Is this something that has been an issue? Because that would help me in how I look at the current policy versus changing the current policy if you're seeing issues.
We have not had anything specific. I think there's probably been some stuff that we've all seen on the news or post-election teachers, posting videos and things like that, but those are then shared publicly, but we have not had anything that's raised any concerns, at least in the time that I've been.
Sorry.
I'll just say quickly, I'm in support of this policy. I think it's well crafted, having been on the policy committee in the past, and dealt with policies that deal with controversial issues. Not this particular policy, but other issues of broader interest. I understand the difficulty in crafting something that's going to handle all cases. I would prefer more guardrails in this case than fewer, but I think everyone's had a say in it. I think we're ready to put it out to the public and see if any more public comments. So any member of the public that has not already spoken on this before we take it to a vote? Bring it back to the board. Any further board comment? All right, all in favor to approve the policy 6114? Mr. Lee, Mr. Peterson, Ms. Maxon Kennelly, all opposed. Mr. Krasnoff, Ms. Jacobson, and Mrs. Guernsey, motion fails 3-3.
So if I can follow up, Mr. Peterson, as a next step, because this was on the audit, it is a 2004 policy. We will actually, now that I have to self-correct here, we will have to take it up in policy, if not simply to bring it for a reaffirmation vote. And so I don't think I'm gonna put on the next agenda because we have a fairly heavy agenda next time, but it will come up spring. I will alert the board when we are about to do that, but it's gonna be straight previous language unless I get some feedback from the board on something we need to do, because.
Or if someone wants to make a motion to delete it.
Correct. So, thank you.
Moving along. Items B, 7B, approval to delete policy 6152, instructional grouping, with the recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the deletion. Policy 6152, instructional grouping. May I have a motion? Ms. Maxon Kennelly, Mr. Lee seconds.
I received no questions on this, so I don't have anything further to say.
Ms. Jacobson.
Thank you. I have a few questions, as I actually quite like this policy. Mrs. Maxon, through the chair to Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, can you give us some examples of what instructional grouping that are happening in our schools now?
I'm gonna let Dr. Zavajan take that.
And I have some specifics.
Let me answer your question first. You want to do the specifics. So
I can ask you the specifics. So for example, is SRBI tiered intervention and instructional grouping?
students are grouped. I would not consider that an instructional group, no.
CLCs? Okay, so why don't you there's no definition in here, so that's why I'm questioning what would that look like?
It's one of the reasons we redlined it. We believed it didn't provide us any guidance or direction in what to do. There are instructional groups in classrooms on certain days, so elementary classrooms call groups with teachers. I would consider those instructional groups. And I would say that goes from pre-K through 12. I would not consider a track necessarily an instructional group in how it's written. But we didn't see value in the way the policy was written to give us any direction moving forward on it.
Is the instruction that happens during Win and Flex instructional grouping?
Small group of students who are grouped for a specific purpose instructionally, then yes.
Okay. What about our various math courses at the middle schools? Are those instructional grouping?
The teacher pulls a group from that class for a particular instructional reason, I'd say yes, that's an instructional group. Otherwise, it's a class.
Okay, so like having 3 different levels of math in 6th grade would not be an instructional grouping?
So there are 3 different classes.
So the answer is no, that's not an instructional grouping.
The instructional groups within those classes.
Within, but I'm talking about just having those different levels. Okay. AP, college prep, and honors are not instructional grouping.
Classes within our program of studies.
What about early literacy academy that we have at McKinley?
Students are placed there based on their present levels of performance and their disability.
Not an instructional grouping.
I'll call that an instructional group.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, then the only thing that qualifies as an instructional grouping is within a classroom.
In my mind, yes, unless we want to define tracks as instructional groups.
This policy is being proposed to be deleted, so I'm trying to understand what I'm deleting.
I don't know how it was defined when it was written. Again, it did not provide us direction. That's why we got rid of it.
Okay, there's one sentence in here in the beginning of the 2nd paragraph that says the goal of these practices is to promote a developmental approach to skill development. We don't like that goal?
So when I say that there's instructional groups, just because we don't have a policy doesn't mean that teachers are not still going to group students for instructional purposes. I would hope that they do.
If I can interrupt, I think the majority of the policy discussion was that we want in policy to be instructive and useful and actually to have an intent that gets carried out. So our discussion was never that by striking this, it's not going to happen. It was that there was nothing in here that was to be frank, useful. It's happening regardless, but this policy wasn't useful. It doesn't tell staff what to do, how to do it, or anything like that. And that was, and Ms. Guernsey can correct me if I'm wrong, but that was the primary focus of the conversation, was that this didn't provide direction to staff
I guess my.
for a behavior that is simply, it's going to continue, that this wasn't useful.
I just think having something, whether it's this language or otherwise, Mrs. Mexicanelli, does lend that we're supportive of that and ensuring that students are provided with whatever grouping might be necessary to fulfill their needs in an individual basis. So if it needs to be tweaked to do, in order to do that, I would be more supportive of that. I'm concerned about, I understand what you're saying. We could say that about pretty much any policy though, like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't need to have a policy for something that's already happening. Otherwise, the alternate viewpoint of that is the policy supports that that's happening. One more example that I have, and I don't know if Mrs. Goss wants to answer this question or not, but when we were approving the ELA resource, part of those purchases were the leveled readers, and we wanted to, that those were going to be happening, the leveled reading groups inside of our elementary classrooms. I just wanted to get confirmation. Is that considered a grouping? I would assume that is.
Teacher, if a teacher is placing students in a group for a specific instructional purpose, that is an instructional group.
I agree.
Is that happening?
Absolutely.
Right.
just wanna add-
for different purposes, it might not just be on a level or the level of the book. They're grouped for different purposes for them to meet their needs, yes.
I'm getting to more of like a differentiation question. So that is happening.
Elementary level, yes.
So we would never
Yes.
expect, if we could take the instructional groups out, we would expect our teachers to have good classroom management. We don't have a policy on classroom management. Something that's expected of the job of a teacher. When I say this policy didn't direct us, there's a lot of good, efficacious teaching practices that are expected that we would never place in policy. Right?
I'm just asking.
Which is why we deleted.
Yeah, the only thing I was gonna add is similar to what we just said, is that I don't think anyone's aware that this policy even exists. It's just providing good teaching to students. And so nothing is being driven by this policy.
Other than I like some of the language in it, so.
Oh, well,
Okay.
other than that,
Um,
I don't think anyone ever refers to it. I don't think an administrator, when they sit down and do any type of goal setting or anything with are referring to this policy with their teachers or their staff.
Ms. Guernsey?
I'm sort of interested in what Mrs. Jacobson was saying, because in policy, we do oftentimes include our philosophy statements, and it sort of feels like this is falling under that. So in some ways, because I do feel strongly about instructional grouping, now I kind of want to hold on to it. And I'm trying to remember a conversation that we had in policy about differentiation and how there are concerns around widening the achievement gap because of differentiation. I'm just trying to recall that conversation. And so I don't know if you can speak to that, because I'm trying to remember it, and then I might have a question depending on.
Well, differentiation many times is implemented as altering the grade level standard expected within the approved curriculum that you guys approve within the classroom. That widens achievement gaps. Students don't meet the standards and therefore get further behind as they go further in the grade level if you over differentiate for them.
So that sort of complicates this for me now that I'm thinking of it in this philosophical context.
Might I also add, I'm not sure if a teacher goes off grade level for purpose of differentiation, not sure it's even allowed outside of an IEP. No one can modify the curriculum except for an IEP.
Any other questions or comments? I'll just say that I'm generally of the opinion that cleanup of the policy manual is a good thing. And if administration is telling me they're getting no guidance from policy, and that what it's describing is best practices, I see no need to. I don't feel like this is something that we need to you make a statement to ask you to do, since it's already best practice.
There's no doubt our teachers and our administrators are talking about groups. I see it all the time. Ms. Jacobson brought up flex and when. I know they talk about instructional groups where best benefit students within there. They don't refer to the policy when they do that.
Mr. Krasner.
Just my one concern, deleting a policy that allows for the opposite to say you can't do it. I'm hoping that doesn't happen if they were to make this policy.
That you can't group students.
I'm just making that statement. I hope that would not be the case.
If there were a policy that prohibited grouping students, that
I understand.
would be a story.
But when there's a policy, you gotta adhere to it. If there is no policy, again, interpretation, but I hear you.
Jacobson, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'll just follow up on Mrs. Guernsey's question, comment, which I really wasn't focused on until right now, is I think that that's a little bit concerning what I've heard, and given, looking at some other districts that do have this policy, where it is expressly stated that the responsibility of the district is to ensure that all students are provided differentiation to meet their highest potential. So some of the commentary around not being allowed to do that is cause for concern for me. I'm not really sure what the achievement gap comment was, and I don't want to infer more than what just was stated here. But I would hope that we weren't not allowing for movement forward in order to not have that gap grow, so.
I'd say that the question that was posed was about widening achievement gaps. And if you continue to differentiate down, I believe I said, you widen them over time.
Mrs. Mexico.
I hear the points of my fellow board members regarding sometimes we like the 30,000-foot high-level mission philosophical approach. And so I just want to remind everybody, it's only 3.5 lines, if you'll bear with me, of a policy that we reviewed and readopted this past November. And it was approach to instruction. It shall be the instructional philosophy of the Fairfield Public Schools to use whenever possible an approach to teaching and learning that requires staff to examine and evaluate the individual student's work against standards and benchmarks and develop instruction that is designed to meet individual needs and ensure achievement of the curriculum. And I would say that's the kind of policy to me, which it's number 6,000. It heads the section. It is vague in its nature, and to me would absolutely, that to me was useful. That's the useful of, that stands for us. This policy on instructional grouping, that's where I would expect it to be more almost prescriptive in its nature, and it's not. I would agree. Our discussion again in policy was almost entirely on, this doesn't tell anybody what to do. And the philosophical approach, I think, is beautifully captured by the policy that we already reviewed and readopted. So if that gives anybody a greater comfort level in moving forward, again, people will do as they please, but if it helps people to feel more comfortable with a deletion vote, I just remind people that it's not like we're ignoring the point that is raised there. We've got it right here.
Thank you very much. Members of the public, questions or comments on, before we take this for a vote? Seeing none, back to the board. All in favor of the deletion? Mr. Lee, Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Maxicanelli, all in opposed. Ms. Jacobson, Mrs. Guernsey, abstentions? Motion fails.
No.
Your motion passes 3-2-1. My apologies. All right, item 7C, approval to delete policy 6142.2, reading language arts, with recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the deletion of policy 6142.2, reading language arts, moved by Mrs. Jacobs, or Mrs. McNally, seconded by Mr. Lee.
So once again, I did not receive any feedback from the group, so I don't have any other comments to make. Ms. Goss is here to answer any questions specific to this. about what motivated the district's recommendation that we delete and the policy committee's subsequent approval of deletion.
Any board comments?
I would love to hear more about the philosophy of why delete it.
Sure. This is a non-mandated policy, first of all. Reference is 1999. A lot has happened since that time. There's a lot of legislation in place regarding assessment, curriculum, instruction. And this policy just doesn't meet our needs anymore. Again, it doesn't give us direction, doesn't really tell the teachers what to do because there's policy, there's legislation that we must follow. And so when Dr. Parrish reached out to CABE to ask if this policy had been revised, it hadn't. But they gave us a draft of what they thought might be put in place. And what they suggested was that they leave the first paragraph and then change the rest of the policy to indicate the legislation that's in place. So the other thing you should know is this policy is quite small compared to what it was embedded in. It really was meant for priority school districts. So obviously Fairfield took all of that verbiage out because it doesn't apply to us and left the remainder of the policy for Fairfield back in 2000. So much of that doesn't apply to us. They're suggesting leaving the first paragraph. I did give my feedback about that first paragraph. I too had concerns about the way it read in terms of differentiation. It sort of indicates that every single student will be provided with a program at his or her ability and level or achievement. And that's just not the case. Teachers cannot differentiate every second of the day, all day long. In fact, that's what happens if we do that and we don't give students access to grade level text and tasks and materials, and that gap does grow. What we do instead, in terms of differentiation, is we try to scaffold and give students an entry point to that grade level material. Part of the day, however, students may be reading material that is better suited to their level, but that's for a small part of the day. And then the rest of the day, they are focused on grade level. So we did have some concerns about that antiquated language.
Jacobs.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. I was going to provide feedback here tonight and to the board, if this could be set back to policy to maintain that paragraph as was recommended, but to change that bottom part on the 1999 exactly to what you're saying, where they put in the phonics in the new legislation. And I've seen other districts that did adopt that in terms of being clear and of the new statutory requirements around the science of reading and the different fluency and phonetical, all those pieces. So my position, and I don't know if anyone else shares it, would be to send this back to policy, maintaining that top paragraph as recommended, but changing the bottom part, just like as Mrs. Goss has recommended that other districts have adopted recently. So that's my input on it.
Just on a logistical basis, you could make a motion to refer to the policy committee. That would supersede the vote up or down on the
I'm not
policy.
sure if anybody else had anything to say, but I'm happy to do that, Mr. Peterson, if.
Well, Ms. Mexico.
My only one quick reply, and I appreciate Ms. Goss saying that, but I'm not sure how much I said this in policy. I find the first 3 lines of this policy to be childlike. I mean, I find them embarrassing. I wouldn't want them in policy, to be honest with you. People need to learn to speak, read, write, and listen. We have to have that in policy. That's a pure, and again, I don't think I went into this in the committee because we were looking at the possibility of striking the whole thing. And I hear what you're saying. That's problematic at the end of that paragraph. But I don't even find the beginning useful. But however, as Mrs. Jacobson said, if this is something that were to come back and that it was that the rest of the board didn't share that view, they liked that opening wording, then I definitely would appreciate that feedback, because if this got sent back to policy, I would want to get rid of that.
I'll just follow up.
Would there be any objections?
Yeah.
I'll just follow up, just that is what key, I mean, certainly the committee can change something to be more eloquent or as you might see fit. But that we're talking about different policies that came from CAVE or not, so I'm just not sure what the filter is of whether we're adopting or not adopting. I guess it's just subject to what you feel is best, but there are components of that, again, that I do think are from a philosophical standpoint where I do stand. So in terms of what we expect to be provided to each student in our district. So if people wanted to have refer back, I'm happy to make the motion, but if not, then.
Mr. Lee?
So we could take the first line out if it goes back to policy, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly?
We could do whatever you like.
So wouldn't harm anything if we sent it back, if anything we could.
It's just more work for the policy committee. And when it comes back to us, we'll have the discussion again. Mr. Krasno?
I was actually gonna echo, I'd rather it be more robust than just get rid of it. I think we strive to achieve things for students, and eliminating that kind of changes that.
If I can play devil's advocate a little bit, would it be this is, of course, I think this is the most important subject, it's my own, but we don't have a policy on any other department, on any other program. So I guess I'm unclear on our attachment to this. And we don't have a science instruction policy. We don't have a social studies instruction policy. We have curriculum and we have approach to instruction. And again, if it were useful, if there were edits, and on the other hand, this is also not a hill I have any interest in dying on. So, but I don't understand why this would be one we would fight for. And
in the elementary school currently, it takes up almost half a day.
But
compared to any other subject.
Absolutely, but it does. We don't need a policy to direct that. It just does.
We're, as a district, saying it's important, should be a policy. To delete it, you're now that policy. From my standpoint.
Do we have a motion to refer to the committee?
I will propose a motion to refer policy 6142.2, reading language arts, back to the policy committee to further.
All right, it's moved by Mrs. Jacobson, seconded by Mr. Krasnoff. Any comments on the motion? This is kind of board business, so I don't think it's a public comment issue. So all in favor of the motion to refer? In favor is Mr. Krasnoff, Mr. Lee, Mrs. Jacobson, and Mrs. Guernsey, all opposed. Myself and Mrs. Maxon Kelly, this is referred back to policy committee.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to, make a note of that. Item 8A, new business, approval of Holland Hill Elementary School partial roof replacement project number 051-0156RR. Recommended motion that the Board of Education accept the Holland Hill Elementary School partial roof replacement project number 051-0156RR as complete. Ms. Jacobson, second by Mr. Lee. Can you repeat that for the, a little louder?
This is the formality. We have the Board of Education has to accept the project as complete so that we can state filing.
Any questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the public? Back to the board, all in favor? The vote is unanimous, 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Superintendent's report.
Yeah, just a few items. Just want to recognize Mill Hill grade 5 students, Jackson Zagrin and Dante Bufisi. They were recognized at the 26th annual elementary celebration of the arts, sponsored by CAS. Jackson and Dante were selected for their exceptional citizenship, teamwork, and artistic talent. I want to give a big thank you to Mrs. Arcari, Mrs. Nokta, for supporting their students. Congratulations to Jackson and Dante. This is a big one here. Congratulations to Ward High School senior Amo John Gikunta for being named a 2025 Coca-Cola Scholar. Following an extremely competitive selection process, including interviews with a committee of Scholar alumni and staff members, Amo was selected as one of 150 candidates across the nation. He will be honored at the 2025 Scholars Weekend, April 3rd through the 6th in Atlanta, Georgia. He will also receive a $20,000 college scholarship. He was also recently named a U.S. Presidential Scholar Program candidate. Congratulations to Amo. This is an amazing accomplishment and reflects well on Fairfield Public Schools.
To sign, if I'm not mistaken, that's 2 years in a row, Fairfield High School has a Coca-Cola scholarship.
Correct.
Last year there was one of them, yes.
Last Monday, we celebrated the 100th day of school. It was a great day. Elementary students and staff do an exceptional job celebrating the 100th day mark of the school year. They also, many of our communities joined together to collect coats and food items for those in need. And I was at Mill Hill with the kindergartners there. We saw quite a few 100-year-old kindergartners walking around. That was pretty awesome. So we do have some pictures on our social media that you should check out. Last week was National School Counseling Week. We celebrated all our contributions of our school counselors and recognized the tremendous impact that they have on our students, whether working through challenging situations or connecting families and staff to develop plans for success. Our school counselors consistently provide relevant and critical support, especially this time of year as we gotten through the college application and process. So thanks to our school counselors. Always want to recognize them. We also want to say February 15th is National SRO Day. So let's join me in recognizing the valuable work of our school resource officers.
Give them the day off.
Give them the day off. I agree. I don't know why they would pick a Saturday to give them recognition. So I hopefully within the next couple of days, since we do have a long President's Weekend, that we give a little thank you to our school resource officers here in Fairfield. I have to say they're a tremendous component of the Fairfield Police Department. I had some feedback from some parents recently just about the way they interact with students. It's a very unique group of law enforcement officers. So. And again, we had Fairfield Public Schools had 85 band, choir, and orchestra students selected to perform at the audition-only Connecticut Music Educator Association Western Regional Festival at Wilton High School. Festival brought together the best high school musicians from the Western region of Connecticut to participate in 2 days of rehearsals, culminating in an evening performance. And we are incredibly proud of our talented students and thankful for the support of the entire Fairfield Public School music staff.
We want to committee liaison reports. I wanted to lead this off with some updates to the board about the town's working group capital project. Just today, you may remember there was the RFP that was out over the past month for consultants to do the multi-site working group evaluations. That I believe they got 5 bids. It was shortlisted to 3. I was invited down to town hall today to observe the interview process, which I found very illuminating. There are 3, good candidates who have kind of a detailed approach that they're pitching. And I know that the working group is going to meet again tomorrow to discuss further, and was hoping to approve one of the consultants to begin work fairly quickly. One of the things that was brought up in the narrative and a lot of the questions from the committee and answered by a lot of the consultants was about timeline and about the urgency of moving forward. So timelines were definitely something that was discussed at some detail. But hopefully we will soon in the coming weeks have an actual consultant to work with and more concrete idea of next steps. And again, the first selectman has said on multiple occasions that he wants Board of Ed input on this process. I've been in contact with Eli Gazal, who's been running that out of town hall. And I do have some hopes going forward that once a consultant has been selected, there will be a more regular schedule of meetings, some of which hopefully will be public meetings. Yeah, this goes.
Just curious, this morning, you said you were observing, were you asked to give input, as well?
I was not one of the questioners. There was a short evaluation period after we saw the three where I did give some impressions. But it was made clear in the meeting that I was not a voting member in terms of who was going to be selected. So, but again, I was very happy to see the process, and I think that it was, it's detailed and it's very thorough. Mr. Krasnoff.
That one, I still have concerns and we're not really being part of the process to this point, so
Hear you.
we're not really part of the process at this point, even though it is said that we are. So I hope we are part of the process going forward. I hope it is a little bit more transparent. Not only as a board member, but happen to be a parent at the school that is in question. I know the parent and student body have some concerns about the timeline, so.
I understand that, and I will say that I voiced some concerns about the kind of public nature of, the public interest in how the project is evolving. And again, I've been in contact with Town Hall, I've been in contact with the group, and hoping that this can be more regularized. Several of the consultants were talking about, meetings every 2 weeks, whether some board of ed input could overlap that. So those were discussions that I had with the working group, and I hope to continue going forward.
And I appreciate all the work you have done. Not saying you're not trying, I hope.
Completely understand.
I hope the town works with us a little more, because I would hate for us for one, possibly not be on the timeline, but not only that, maybe come up with something at the end of the day that the town hall team thinks is a great idea, which I'm sure they may have a great idea. Doesn't work in the education realm, because town buildings, education buildings, and the process is very different. So that's one of my big concerns.
I've been advocating for having a seat at the table from the beginning of the process.
Thank you.
Ms. Jacobson.
You mentioned the timeline. So originally, when this funding was approved, the timelines were, by late spring. Is that the timeline that they're on?
Without going into too much detail about what was said in the interview session today, I will say that there was some concern about meeting a deadline that would be that close. Mexico?
Just one quick question. So Mr. Krasnoff's point, this working group isn't coming up with a single recommendation, I'm more clarifying for myself. Isn't this more of a fact finding? Like, this is possible, this you could do, but it would entail this. That was more my impression, that this particular site has a lot of potential issues. And before we go ahead with a single idea, we need to find out X, Y, and Z. So I didn't think it was going to be coming out with, this is what we are recommending because we think this is great, which to Mr. Krasnoff's point, absolutely could not be what the full board had been interested in, but that's not the functioning of this working group. Is that correct?
No, in fact, the way that Town Hall has been describing this is a funneling process. You may remember, I think it was in November, December, we got the matrix of all the different possibilities. And the thought is this work will begin to funnel that down. And doing some initial site work, doing some other research, finding out what things are feasible and what are not, and then doing more work as we own as that funnel narrows. But then ultimately having options to present at the end of the process.
Okay, thank you.
But not necessarily doing complete work on all.
It's not a decision making, it's more fact finding.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So you have,
Yeah, so there are 11 options. Well, as a fact find, and it comes down to 3 or 4, comes back to the Board of Ed, or is it? What stage?
my understanding of the process is that there will be a final report, and that report will be presented to us for comment.
And do we make the approval, or is it going back to the Board of Select, or the working group?
Well,
I'm assuming you're not gonna come up with all 11. I'm assuming this group is the vendor's gonna come up, say, okay, out of the 11, maybe they're 4 or 5 or 3 or 2. We get that final report, it's still the town's project, correct?
I mean, ultimately, that's the case anyway. You may remember with the Mill Hill project, ultimately what was funded by the town was different than what this body recommended. But I don't wanna speak for the process that far in advance. All I can say is that it's been represented to me. Town Hall is very eager to have Board of Ed buy-in for whatever project is ultimately forward. Ms. Jacobson.
Just to follow up on that, statutorily, the Board of Ed has to approve ed specs for any project that goes to the state, so the Board of Ed, it will have to come back to the Board of Ed in addition to ed specs that have to be passed by the Board of Ed as well, so that's just law.
Well, if to go back to the Mill Hill example, we had to edit our ed specs for that.
Oh, I'm well aware of that.
Right, that hence the example is that ultimately the board has to decide.
Mr. Krasnoff.
And that's part of my concern. Can we do certain things possibly, but state allow us to do certain things, maybe another conversation. So I don't want to get down a rabbit hole that they may have a great idea, but the state's gonna say no to, and we knew that, and they may not have understood that because they hadn't had a conversation with us about how the process works.
And I mean, I will say again, for my impressions today of the interviewees they were well versed in state processes. Any other thoughts or comments? I'll continue, since it's on me in terms of committee liaison reports. We had our Finance Budget Committee meeting last Wednesday. We had a nice discussion about the budget season, kind of, things that maybe could be improved, things that worked well. I think one of the things that came out of that was interesting. Sense was that it was nice having the separate weekly meetings, spreading it out over a little bit more of time. Mr. Testani actually came up with the idea, in past years, we had a final vote on a Thursday, done 2 meetings in a week. Kind of thought that with the volume of questions that we've gotten and the time that it takes staff to answer those questions, that perhaps next round we could have, instead of a final discussion and a vote on Tuesday like we had this year, have a final discussion, but a vote on so basically adding a 5th meeting, having the final vote on, having the big discussion on Tuesday, but coming in on Thursday, if there are any kind of questions we can answer in the meantime, give staff a little.
No, what I said was do Tuesday, Thursday.
Oh, you're correct.
The fourth
right.
meeting
I'm
being
sorry.
Thursday rather than Tuesday, so it gives
It's a 3
the weekend to put in any questions. And then give some days to answer it before you guys have to.
Apologies for.
Yeah, no.
But I thought that was giving staff more time, something I think we consider next time we make the.
Rather than vote and meet on Tuesday, give the extra 2 days for questions to come in and responses to.
The other major thing that we talked about in Budget Committee, we actually got a presentation from Connie Saxel, who's the town auditor. She came in and she's actually been working with the Board of Ed at the Board of Finance's suggestion to oversee some of our processes. She's talking specifically about payroll, seeing if proper controls were in place, watching our flow. We got a very positive report from her. She said that they identified a couple of little things that were quickly corrected. But my attitude, I think the attitude of the committee in general is always nice to have another set of eyes, an experienced set of eyes, an outside set of eyes on processes. So we are hopeful that she will be working with us further in the future, just for everyone to get our policies practices in better honed. Jacobson.
Just a update on the General Assembly and the legislative process. They're still pretty much in the committee and proposing concepts at this time. I have worked with administration where I have a question or concern on something in order to be able to provide feedback to at least our delegation or submit testimony. So early days yet, but I am watching every day for what may come before us. So that's going on. And then facilities is meeting next week. So the next time I'll have an update for
Mr. Lee.
On the HVAC IQ committee, those switch gears that we've been waiting for 1.5 years from are in, and actually they are operational, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Pop George, at North Stratfield School. Over the summer, the other 2 schools, they'll be connected. Right now, obviously, they're going through testing and adjustments in the school, so some days may be really boiling hot. Some days may be really cold, but that's just part of the process with that. And then, of course, then over the summer, more work will be done and prepping Tomlinson for next summer to be completed with their equipment. But by, actually, I'm not gonna jinx it, but we're moving along. They are under budget and the rest of the work will be completed over the summer for the other three schools.
Fantastic. Mr. Krasnoff.
Nothing for CES, but I am very excited tomorrow to go to Sherman and judge Invention and Convention. So our next meeting, if we do have any kind of comments, I know it will be a town hall. I would love to share some of the cool things that I see and judge tomorrow.
Very nice. Mrs. Guernsey.
Thanks. So we had our first curriculum committee meeting last Friday and I think we covered a lot of ground and I think really productive, and we're still sort of, the role of this committee is still evolving in terms of the relationship with the administrators, and we're just providing access to us in hopefully a flexible way. For example, if the world language curriculum, if and when it's ready, if that's something that they would like to bring to the committee, we could give them just feedback on the formatting of it, simple responses to sort of like how it looks versus like the content. So providing that kind of feedback, hopefully if they need it, that's fine too. We talked about a slight change to the order of curriculum review, and there was a policy that we passed with the intention that the board would give feedback at an early stage. So in this committee, we thought that instead of giving feedback first and then having the presentation, because it seemed like a lot of board members sometimes aren't even sure of like the context of how this fits into the state standards or really anything that they should even comment on, to sort of try flipping that, right? Get that teaser presentation and then allow for board feedback. So we'd love to give that a try. If anyone here has feedback that wouldn't work, love to hear that too. But we just thought for family and consumer sciences, which will be coming up, that maybe that would be a helpful way of approaching it. And we're also looking at the feedback form itself, hopefully to simplify it so that it will be easier to use and everyone will want to just jump right in and put their comments and questions. So again, this is like an evolving process. So I think, I hope that these will be successful changes, but if they're not, again, we want to get that feedback. If there's anything else. We talked a little bit about the timeline, the curriculum timeline, the one that exists in the budget book. And right now it's on a 10-year cycle. And this is something that the administration is looking at more closely, even by subject area, to see how we might make changes that align better even to the purchases we're making. We talked about shortening the span of maybe some or all subject areas to a 6-year cycle. What does that look like? You know, we're not really sure, but that's something they're going to work on and sort of get back to us for discussion. Just trying again to support the work that they're doing here. So yeah, it was exciting, and our next meeting is coming up on April 25th, but we are open to be available for additional meetings as needed. So thank you.
6 years cycle.
Right.
So first, just going back to the policy discussion earlier, just again wanted to alert everybody that once I know when both controversial issues and the reading and language arts are on the agenda, I will be and I hope it's okay. I think I'd rather do it just by email. I don't think it needs to be another board discussion, but I will put out an email to say it is upcoming. I would appreciate some direction. I'll include the links to the policies so you can see them in just their clean black version. But we are going to be floundering if we don't have feedback. So just to alert everybody, I'm really requesting that you give us something, give us anything. But secondly, just to let everybody know that in policy, we did have a very robust discussion along with robust public feedback regarding transportation. We did make, I think, very clear to the public that we were pursuing this as a budgetary issue, and that we did in fact unanimously pass 3-0 the changes to the transportation distance. We are not asking that it be put on the board agenda here. In fact, my plan is do the best I can and get policy committee feedback on some of the comments we got from the public. And we would like it to shift over to the finance committee, and that they can look through some of the suggestions from the public. May not be feasible, but there were definitely some interesting ideas raised. And I just want to encapsulate them in one memo and ask that the finance committee pursue them. You know, if there's any valid points of efficiencies that could be raised, other things that we could pursue as we, you know, navigate this coming spring and its policy issues and budget issues. But I just wanted to alert the board that that took place.
Appreciate that. Jacobson.
Can I just follow up on that point? So we received the ridership data. I'm sure everyone saw that in our Friday packet. I spent a great deal of time over the weekend going over that. This is something probably facilities will talk about as well. But I think it's really important that everyone spend some time. And I think the staff are putting that together and really looking at assigned to bus versus actually on the bus and all of that. So we'll be discussing it next week in facilities as well.
If I could follow up on that, thank you for raising that. I just wanted to get clarification. That was for a week in time,
Yeah.
correct?
Well, it's interesting. So yesterday I was at Ludlow High School. I had to walk over to Ludlow Middle for something. And then when I got back, all the buses were there. So I got stuck waiting for 20 minutes till the buses loaded and left. And it was quite concerning to see the number of buses that left, some of which had.
I want to echo what Mrs. Jacobson said, that the numbers in our Friday packet in that memo were, we've always heard it, but this was data, these were facts, and it's just, no wonder parents are complaining about traffic. You know, but it's a behavior that I'm not sure what we can do about it, but I think we at least have to consider some ideas of what could be done.
I don't think changing the walking distances is gonna increase traffic at the schools. I think that the traffic is there. I had a parent that reached out to me. It was a Dwight parent before the roundabout was finished, complaining about the traffic, number one, of the roundabout. Number two was the residential construction. Again, nothing I can do, but then the drop-off lane. And how long it took to get through the drop-off lane at the school on a daily basis, that it took anywhere from 25 to 30 minutes on some occasions to get through the drop-off lane. That's a fully bus school.
We'll say I've never experienced that.
Well,
I've been in the drop-off lane a few times, but
You may get there late.
possible.
You get there late.
I think I get there early.
I do expect, one of the reasons that I thought about, and again, Mrs. Guernsey and Mrs. Flynn brought up the idea of changing the 25th meeting to a town hall. So the volume of comment that we got from the public, I think it deserves more public hearing, and I invite some of the parents to come back and have a discussion with the full board.
I do want to make we do the town hall meeting. I want to make sure that the earlier comment today about the school security, we can't discuss school security in open forum like that. And I don't know what she was looking to ask and stuff, but those kind of questions cannot be talked about.
In that particular instance, and it was because it was mentioned, there was a suggestion that they can fundraise for an armed security guard. And I said, you cannot fundraise for school personnel.
Ms. Guernsey.
Sorry, just to ask a question about the town hall, do we have a marketing piece that's going out about that to feed?
Yeah, Meg reached out to me today, or Rachel was going to put something together for that, so yes.
That you think it'll go out this week then?
Oh, yeah.
And remind me, we will also have the next stage of the budget will be public by then, correct? I'm sorry that I'm all of a sudden fuzzy on when the first selectmen's.
My understanding is the first selectman is going to present a budget, have a budget presentation at the end of next week. And then the Board of Selectmen meetings are the 24th, 25th, 26th. And I believe we are on the 26th to present our budget to the Board of Selectmen.
But the point being there, and obviously there's much work still to be done. But there will already be an initial proposed Board of Education budget from the first selectman's office.
That is my understanding.
Okay. It's gonna be helpful to not be speaking in theory.
Correct. No, the timing works out very well for this, so It may make our March just a little bit better, but it's a sweet spot for us to interact with the public, I think. Ms. Crescent.
So to that point, I do have an open board comment.
More comment.
I was a little disappointed not to see gifted on here. We did pass it in the budget. I understand that maybe you don't want to do it in case the budget came back to us, but as far as I'm concerned, we all voted for a budget. Other things like construction stuff, operation stuff that was in that budget that made to other places was voted on and discussed today. I don't see why gifted was not. So I personally feel that it should have been, and I would like to see it on if.
25th is a town hall, not having.
Yes, but as I mentioned earlier, we're gonna have a couple of business items. To not have. Any other open board comment? Ms. Jacobson.
Happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
And Washington's
Wishing
birthday.
you all lots of love.
Washington.
Okay, thank you, Jeff, for backing me up there. I mean,
I'm
way to follow up.
I'm gonna go with the Valentine's Day.
Thank you.
Michael Jordan's birthday.
And
Any public comment?
Controversial.
All right, not seeing any public comment, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mrs. Jacobson, second by Mr. Lee. All in favor? We have a 6-0 vote. Thank you.